Welcome to part 2 of adverb clauses. When we left off, you were completing the first exercise on the notes handout. Follow along as we work through the steps. Correct your errors on your handout in a different color. Find the verbs. Will remain and brings. Just as not can come between an auxiliary or modal auxiliary and the main verb, so can other modifiers. Tricky, right? Find the subjects. Who or what will remain? Philip. Who or what brings? He. Find the complete subject and complete predicate for each subject-verb combination. Philip will remain safe and as long as he brings food to the convict. Then determine whether each clause can stand alone or not. As long as is a subordinating conjunction that prevents he brings food to the convict from standing alone. It also helps explain the relationship between the two clauses by telling under what condition Philip will remain safe. We use square green brackets to indicate dependent clauses to make them easier to see in the sentences. Once you can identify adverb clauses, it's time to make sure you punctuate them correctly. Use commas to separate adverb clauses that come before or inside the independent clauses they modify. Notice the use of the comma here, after the adverb clause. And another example of a comma with an opening adverbial clause. Use commas to separate adverb clauses that come inside the independent clauses they modify. And here's another example. We can use pattern codes to aid memory. Here's what we just discussed. Opening adverb clause, comma, independent clause. And here we have the beginning of an independent clause, comma, an interrupting adverb clause, comma, and the conclusion of the independent clause. However, generally do not use a comma when the adverb clause follows the independent clause it modifies. We say generally because there are some complex sentence structures involving multiple adverb clauses in a row, and figuring out whether they are modifying the independent clause in front of them or after them. But for now, let's focus on relatively simple sentence structures. The until adverb clause modifies does return. The so that adverb clause tells why she snuck out. So, we can add one more punctuation pattern to our list. Independent clause, adverb clause. Let's pull it all together now. Using the 4 steps we reviewed in the Part 1 video, identify subjects and verbs, square bracket adverb clauses, underline subordinated conjunctions, and add necessary punctuation. Pause the video to complete the concept check exercise in your video notes handout. Follow along as we work through the steps. Correct your errors on your handout in a different color. The sentence begins with an adverb clause. Although is a subordinated conjunction that makes the clause dependent. And since the sentence begins with the adverb clause, we need a comma in front of the independent clause. Then there is another adverb clause at the end, beginning with the subordinating conjunction since. This clause explains why he hasn't told them, so it modifies the verb in the clause in front of it. Therefore, no comma in front of since. Review any mistakes you made before you complete the exercises assigned by your teacher. In this video, you learned and/or reviewed the requirements for adverb clauses. Can you list them? Subject-verb combinations cannot stand alone as sentences. They function as adverbs modifying the verb in the independent clause, and they begin with subordinating conjunctions. The function of subordinating conjunctions. The steps to identify adverb clauses in sentences, and the proper punctuation for adverb clauses, depending on their location relative to the independent clause they modify. And that concludes this episode of Grammar is Power.